Welcome to Rooted in Our Ancestors' Dreams, the podcast where we explore the wisdom, resilience, and dreams of those who came before us and how their legacy shapes our present and future. I'm Cara, and each week we'll dive into stories, traditions, and conversations that reconnect us with our roots, honor our ancestors, and help us plant seeds for a brighter tomorrow. This podcast is about more than storytelling. It's about reclaiming our narratives, reflecting on our journey, and rooting ourselves in the dreams that carried our people forward. So grab your tea, your journal, or just a moment of quiet as we take this journey together. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Carmen Taylor, MFT, global life coach and creative, and podcast host, and her daughter, Mariah Clemons, an LMSW, a global life coach, and also a podcast host. And today's topic is attachment, motherhood, and the self. Welcome both.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Would you tell us, our listeners, what does Rooted in Our Ancestors' Dreams means to you?
I'll begin. For me, Rooted in Our Ancestors' Dreams is what we all are, or what we should all strive to be, in terms of thinking about the legacies that have come before us and the legacies that we are creating, that we are indeed our ancestors' dreams, and hopefully and prayerfully pushing the next generation forward to then live out our dreams, to be much more than we could even have imagined for them. So maybe not even the dream that we visualize, but even much more than the dream.
Thank you.
And for me, Rooted in Our Ancestors' Dreams, for me personally, means that the way that I show up and every decision that I make goes back to my ancestors and my roots and how they showed up and what they did for their future generations to be what I am today.
Thank you. So, there's a lot to talk about in our topic today, and it's all interrelated. And all of us are in the therapy world, while some of our listeners may not be. So this may resonate with them when we explain some of the terms and the connections between the things. So when we talk about motherhood, what does that term really mean, and how does it connect to early attachment patterns?
I'll begin with that. When I think about the term motherhood, both from my clinical lens and from my personal lens, it speaks to those wounds that were really born of the unmet needs, right? That can be neglect, intentional or unintentional, harm, intentional or unintentional, that comes from our primary mother figure.
Right. It's about how your primary mother figure showed up for you and how the way that she raised you impacted you emotionally and how you show up in your relationships with others.
Thank you. And when we talk about motherhood, so from my lens as a social worker, what I see is that a lot of men and women show up in therapy with a lot of resentment, hurt, attachment issues in different types of relationships, whether it be romantic or friends or even work relationships. And it's all drawn back to how they attach to their mother. So how are you seeing that appear in your clients and in therapy with you?
Yeah, much like you just said, to piggyback on that, seeing both, I guess everyone, men, women, and children, everyone show up in the space in terms of looking at their mother wounds, or identifying their mother wounds, or looking at how their mother wounds are contributing to impacting their relationship, looking at how, if there wasn't that sense of safety, worthiness, and belonging and connection in those very early developmental parts of their life, how that then shows up in other areas, right? In terms of the either inability to connect, or maybe in a overability to connect, or some type of enmeshment. So definitely seeing the residual impacts of not having what they need, and or having, quote unquote, too much, still not what they needed, but not having what they needed as they developed in terms of those early attachment patterns, or in what was modeled and what they experienced.
Yes. And I personally primarily work with children and adolescents. So what I'm hearing is that they have an awareness of their mother and their mother figures and how their mothers show up for them. What I'm noticing is that we continue to get into their attachment style and how the connection between their mother wounds and how they even show up for themselves and the people around them socially. So I've noticed that the awareness between a 12, 13-year-old, they are understanding, since a lot of them are living with their mothers, they can see very clearly how their relationship is being impacted, how their relationship is impacting them as they're growing up and becoming young adults.
So to kind of go back, can either of you explain what we mean by attachment? Like what there are 4 attachment styles. Can you explain what those are to our listeners who may not understand what we mean?
Yeah, attachment styles are patterns of how we attach to others, right? And so looking at anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, disorganized attachment, those are some of the insecure attachment, the attachment styles. So that anxious attachment style speaks to exactly what it sounds like in terms of not feeling safe and secure in attachments and in relationships, and having that anxious, insecure, also anxious/insecure attachment style, not feeling grounded, comfortable, secure in relationships and in attachment. Right? I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to avoidant or disorganized. I could refer to you for that.
No, not necessarily. I would say in general, non-clinical terms, your attachment styles is the way that you socially connect with your romantic partners or your friendships or even your coworkers. How you expect them to show up for you in your relationships is related to your attachment style. Going back to how your mother is involved with attachment style, let's say you do have a mother that is very hands-on and doesn't give you a lot of independent play and is very sheltering of their child. That person may have an anxious attachment style because of the way that their mother raised them in that manner.
Thank you for that. I know as I was going through my internships and even now as I work with clients, I had no understanding of how attachment was relating to the motherhood, but I kept seeing more and more men and women coming in with that particular trait. And it was like a love-hate relationship with the mothers, doing more. Attachment was not my niche, so to speak, but going back to that, I learned more myself as a clinician and even personally how that can affect your relationships. So thank you for shedding some light on that. Many people struggle with guilt or shame when exploring pain related to their mothers. How can we hold space for healing without assigning blame?
Right. I'll begin with this one.
Go ahead. I'm talking about that question, but go ahead.
Okay. So I want to start with that part of your healing is not about assigning blame, rather than it's about acknowledging that the way that your mother showed up for you was not beneficial for your development. And it's okay to acknowledge your mother and see your mother as a full person for the good things that she did, the things that were not beneficial, and the things that were damaging. And all 3 of those things, and then some, all of those things can coexist.
Thank you.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, absolutely agree in terms of the healing is not about blaming. The healing is about acknowledging that those early relational experiences, if you will, those early experiences, they do shape and inform your sense of safety, your sense of worthiness, again, your sense of belonging, and that you can hold both love and hurt. They can coexist. I think one of the myths is that I can't love my mother and acknowledge my pain, and you absolutely can, right? That you can, and many times in my clinical work, I feel like I'm massaging or giving permission, if you will, for individuals to hold both those truths and to acknowledge that both of those things can exist, right? To piggyback again, to echo what Mariah said, that they can coexist. I can have hurt and love. And I don't have to necessarily confront or blame. It's not about that. It's about the acknowledgement and not the blame.
I see that. I mirror what both of you said. I see a lot of people struggling, particularly men, with actually assigning blame or actually, I guess, holding their mother accountable for some very negative behavior, whether it be abuse or abandonment. They seem to struggle with that, but also with holding your mother in a very positive light. But there's a lot of contradiction from session to session, whether it be 1 minute they're angry and the next minute they're feeling very sad about it.
Yeah, I would, again, yes, just thinking about back into that clinical work, that the assignment of blame isn't necessary. And it's really, in my work, helping clients release even the need to assign blame and to really look at the healing part, right? It's not the assignment of blame doesn't necessarily get you closer to healing, but can you release the guilt, release the shame, grieve those unmet needs, reclaim and then re-nurture, right? Reparent yourself in those spaces. And you don't have to assign blame to do any of that. And I want to go one step further and also think about that many of our mothers were parenting with their own mother wounds, right? We're parenting with their own unhealed wounds. So what we got was, most of us, right, the best of what they had to give. And so to also understand, and to echo what Mariah said, to see our mothers as whole people, as whole individuals, and not just see them as mothers. Again, not about assigning blame, but about having a better understanding of the context from which they were even parenting from.
Yeah. A lot of times I kind of compare it to like a grief cycle where they just go back and forth, back and forth. And then sometimes they want to forgive that or allow themselves to grieve what they've lost. And other times they want to remain angry, but I just let them have that space and to just be. So, we spoke a little bit how it looks from a therapeutic lens and also from theirs, but how can individuals begin to reparent themselves and develop a secure attachment as adults? That's the more positive attachment style.
Okay, I'll go a little deeper. I'll take that question since I spoke a little bit about that in terms of that self-nurturing, right? In terms of looking at yourself, looking at those parts of yourself that are that wounded child, and really practicing on identifying what you're feeling in that space. What am I feeling? What do I need? It's something I say in session probably several times a week, but to really have that self-awareness of what you're feeling, and then to move into what do I need? So what does that self-soothing or that emotional regulation look like in those spaces? Affirming your worth, seeking safety, seeking safe relationships, creating boundaries, and moving into those healing spaces, right? That in a therapeutic relationship or with other individuals that, aren't clinicians, but that can provide a safe relationship and model that security, give you that nurturing. So to go back, I'd say first it starts with self, that self-identification, that self-awareness of what's happening, those self-soothing techniques, strategies, if you will, and then moving out to looking at your world, looking at who makes up your community, be it family or a larger community, and are you leaning into, or how are you leaning into those safe relationships that really model the security and the secure attachment that you're seeking? I love that. And that's also a good reminder that healing is not linear. Healing is layered, right? And healing is a ... Healing ... right? There are so many layers, and absolutely, as you begin that healing journey and you begin to look at relationships and experience relationships different, you might not have that reciprocity. And that might be time either to put up different boundaries or maybe just, dare I say, to continue some relationships. Everyone is probably not going to make it through your healing process. When I say everyone, your community will look different. As you're healing, you're going to find out that you literally outgrow some of those relationships. You're in a more healed position, and what that relationship gave you, either you recognize you no longer need, or maybe you recognize you actually never needed as you move towards this healing ...
Thank you. So Carmen, you said two things that I really, that really resonated with me and that really caught my ear is one, the boundaries I think are very, very important. And I think some of our clients have a very hard time laying those and following those boundaries. And then two, the healing being a ... Continue, because I always tell my clients, you may not be healed because it's a journey and sometimes a cycle, and that healing is a continuous thing, just like learning throughout life. So can you speak more about how to maybe be firmer in boundaries, or what boundaries look like?
Sure. One, I guess, first identifying what you need in a boundary, recognizing what you need. So I'll speak of in a relational context, recognizing what you need from that relationship and where those needs begin and end. And when I say need, both good and bad, or positive and negative, if you will. So if there's someone who you're experiencing them in a way that is not comfortable, is negative, and for whatever reason, not how you want to experience the relationship, that's a place to say, hey, you did X, Y, and Z, or you've done X, Y, and Z, and this is how this is impacting me. And this is a boundary. This is how I need this to look moving forward. This is the boundary I'm placing here. That if we're going to continue to be in relationship with one another, this, whatever the boundary is that I'm placing here, this needs to happen, or this doesn't need to happen, depending on what we're talking about. Really looking at, and again, examining yourself, and feeling what's happening in this relationship that is not pleasing, is not pleasant, does not feel good, is bringing pain. And then what do I need to do differently? How do I need to let this person, one, know this that you're doing, or this that we've experienced is not okay with me. I don't need to experience this anymore, or I need to experience this instead. And standing firm on that. I like to say we have to stand on our boundaries with 10 toes. Like, we have to stand on them. I think it's difficult, one, because in most relationships where there have not been boundaries or been poor boundaries, the person may hear it and understand and acknowledge and say yes, but because the pattern of the relationship is so fixed and they're used to pushing in certain places, that the person holding the boundary then has to, again, like I said, stand firm. You have to stand on those boundaries 10 toes. The moment you start to waver in those boundaries, you have the potential of not just going one step backwards, but going 10 steps backwards, because you get caught back into those old relational patterns. And then it's even harder to reset that boundary, if you will. And if someone continuously disrespects the boundaries, as I said before, that might be a relationship that you're no longer aligns with your healing self. And that might be a place, again, to either put up different boundaries in terms of how much access that person has to you, or the ultimate boundary that this person no longer has access to you, because you can't create emotional safety in that relationship because of their lack of respect for your boundaries.
Thank you. Mariah, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah.
Very flawless. Thank you. How can therapists, community leaders, or even loved ones support someone who's navigating deep mother hurt?
I love that. Yeah, and I think therapists, obviously we're trained to show up for people. We're trained to know how to lean in with curiosity. And I think for loved ones, support people in the community. I think it first starts with these kind of conversations, right? It starts with really looking at mother wounds, looking at mother hurt, taking off the myth that we have to have a blame and we have to have, this confrontation and we have to have all these things. That I think exposing and educating and taking the stigma off of mother hurt, and recognizing that our mothers mothered us with what they had, right? Regardless of if that is in extreme cases of, absolute, child abuse, where we can see, okay, this is what happened. That's the best that person had. I started my career in child welfare, which I think was the best place for me to start a career and then come into being in more of a clinical space, because I saw people at their very worst, right? I saw and was able to, even in those spaces, lean in with compassion, have an understanding that even people who are perpetrators of child abuse, there's it's not so much what's wrong with them, what happened to them, even if it was as a result of drug abuse or addiction or anything, what happened to that individual, even that's addiction became part of their lives. So I think when we're talking about how can we, beyond therapists, like I said, we're trained, loved ones in the community at large, start to address and support someone with mother hurt, it's these kind of conversations, right? Taking the stigma off of it, taking the need to blame and the shame off of it, and recognizing that mothers are people, right? And that they have experienced things that caused them to parent the way they did or the way they didn't. So I think to move in as a society and just accept it and not, have the shame or blame or how dare you, say something about your mother, right? That these are that fact and truth. This is what happened. And can we radically accept what happened or what didn't happen so that we can all move into a level of healing? I think for my daughter and I, we have a great relationship and we hold space for each other. And I can hear from her, hey, when you did this when I was 7, that didn't really land the way you thought it did. That was hurtful. And for me to accept that as her experience and not take it personal. Now, I understand right now I'm talking, mother wound, mother healing 2.0, right? Where we're talking about the actual rift in a relationship and then the reconciliation. But even in saying that not all mother wounds will require that. Not all mother wounds will have the ability to have that, but there still can be healing in that space.
Thank you. Thank you. You spoke of sometimes what our mothers have experienced themselves. Can either of you speak about how that may manifest themselves? We often hear the word toxic with relationships, but what are some things that you would see for someone who may be having some attachment issues or the mother hurt?
Well, I'll go deeper in terms of like what I said, that that mothers parent from their own unhealed wounds more often than not, right? And so to look at just them having a different level of emotional wherewithal, emotional resources, if you will, to be able to parent that child in the way that the child needs, right? They're parenting from the best place that they have, right? And so in terms of looking at mothers as people, looking at, again, that we don't have to assess blame, but that we can validate the pain and understand simultaneously that our mother's limitations in their parenting and how we experience them as parenting is shaped by their own circumstances and how they were mothered.
If either of you could offer one message of compassion or liberation to those struggling to heal from attachment wounds or maternal pain, what would it be?
I would say remind those healing from mother wounds that healing, to again echo what Mariah said, healing is a journey and it's not linear, it's layered. And it's not about rewriting or even in some terms even reconciling your past. It's about really reclaiming and nurturing yourself, becoming that mother for those parts of yourself that need mothering, becoming that mother for yourself. So it's not about, again, rewriting the past, but about acknowledging the past is and was, and what do I need now? And how can I offer that to myself in terms of that self-nurturing and that self-love? And then how can I ask for it from my community, my family, my community at large? How can I ask for those things that I need? And that speaks right back to that boundary space. So I guess to summarize it, it's not about rewriting the past. It's about reclaiming that right to have a secure relationship. And it starts with having that secure, nurturing relationship with yourself.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Do either of you have any recommended readings or workbooks or anything that our listeners could maybe learn more about this, or something that kind of resonated with you?
I think learning, even for the layperson, learning more about attachment styles. And I like to recommend soft Google searches. Not if you got 5 tabs open, that's probably too many, but really looking out. I mean, there's lots of, nothing that resonates in terms of that I've read, like, oh yeah, that's the one specifically for a layperson, but really looking at maybe even taking some of those attachment style quizzes that you find online and recognizing what your attachment style is. And then I would recommend really reflecting on that and really starting to experience how that shows up in your day-to-day life. For example, if you recognize you have insecure attachment, really starting to learn what that means, and then so learn it in theory and then see how it's actually showing up in your day-to-day life. And if those aren't ways you want to respond or react in day-to-day life, take the time to really understand yourself and understand, how do I want to show up here? What is happening here that's present, and what is happening here that's residue, if you will, from whatever this attachment style is. So I would encourage really learning about, from the mother wound, how that has impacted your attachment style, and to learn how that's showing up in your life for the good, the positive, the negative, and how you want it to show up and start to really heal and transform and make the inner changes that you need so that you can show up the way you want to.
Thank you. Thank you. So to our listeners, as we come to the end of this podcast, I'd like to invite our guests to each share with us their podcast, ways to contact them, ways to follow them. Carmen, do you want to start?
I'm going to defer to Mariah first, if that's okay. Go ahead, Mariah.
Okay, Mariah.
And yeah, to see us, we're both practicing clinicians. I practice in Tennessee, Texas, Illinois, and Kentucky. And you can reach me and Mariah. Mariah practices in Illinois. Interchanges Counseling, PLLC.com.
What is a global life coach?
I'm going to let me deeper in that space. We also travel quite extensively and spend extended stays internationally to really try to have the best understanding of other cultural experiences. So we try to have 30-day, 30, 60, 90-day stints in other countries to really be able to connect with people. And so we're talking globally, not just the ability to serve people around the globe, but really we've purposely and intentionally consider ourselves global citizens, and therein are able to understand the cultural context of people literally around the world.
That's awesome. Thank you. Was there anything else you want to add?
I don't. This has been a pleasure. I hope that the listeners really begin to do that self-reflection. And I want to take it even deeper, do that self-interrogation to really understand what's happening for them, how they're showing up, why they're responding to different things. Much of it can be linked to that attachment style, which, as we have highlighted here today, can be linked to mother wounds and that early development of attachment.
Thank you so much. And to our listeners, as we close, we want to leave you with this thought. You are living proof that your ancestors' dreams were valid, powerful, and worthy. How will you honor them today? As we walk this journey together, we are planting seeds for those who come after us. Let's root ourselves in hope, healing, and a vision for a brighter future. Thank you for joining us on Rooted in Our Ancestors' Dreams. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need it. Please reach out to our guests, and don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social media, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Until next time, stay rooted, stay inspired, and keep dreaming. Thank you.